Welcome to Time to Glow Again, an educational webinar with Dr. Michelle Veneziano from her Principles and Practice of Osteopathic Self-Care series. Good morning, June. Good morning, Summer. It actually may not be morning for everyone, right? Felicity is in London. Aloha and good morning from Honolulu. Vallejo, California, Melissa, Marcia in St. Charles, Missouri, the state where osteopathy was initiated in the late 1800s. Jean-Baptiste is here. She's in the Philippines. Gloria is coming in from London. A lot of people signed up, won't be her live. So this is a special group. This is the live group. And it is, in fact, the exact number of spaces that fills my screen, no more, no less, which feels a little bit sacred, geometrically speaking. We are beginning now. Welcome everyone to It's Time to Glow Again, the first of several webinars in which I'm intending to share with you the medicine in this book that many of you may not have yet read, although I believe some of you have. It's kind of a preview of the larger book that I'm writing, that I'm very excited about, that is finally my actually giving to the world the healing that's in my body that is meant to be out there. My name is Dr. Michelle Veneziano. I am a traditionally trained, conventionally trained medical doctor. And before I ever went to med school, I knew I was intuitive and intended to be a change agent in this world. And I stayed in touch with my original knowing. I actually did lose some of it in the course of the training. It was so really powerful how that experience the experience of going to sleep in the collective, right? We're all born beautifully awake and in touch and connected with spirit and planet. And then we go, we slowly go to sleep. And in the going to sleep, our physical bodies actually become dull. You know, in the bringing back of my sight and my gifts, which I use in the work that I do with healing people with my hands and myself, I watch myself go from the equivalent of a dull light bulb to whoosh, like coming back into full presence. And this is a deep and profound concept that is reflected in depictions of beings throughout time. And originally, you know, now we depict people who are spiritually awake with this ring around their crown. It's this light that comes around the crown. But in fact, that radiant orb encompasses the whole body when we're fully on, when we're fully ourselves, fully present, fully connected, fully present in location and time. So I'm going to give you a little sense of our trajectory of this hour together. And actually in this moment, I'd like you all to do a bit of a body scan, a wide perception body scan, not to say to zero in on, oh, I have a pain here, but to widen your perception, perhaps to fill the entire room, and notice where it is that your attention is pulled in to either your physical self or some awareness of the space around you. And we're doing a little bit of a before and after, right? I actually want us to take a little bit of an inventory, like, I'm going to name 3 things. I'm going to name that my right body, I'm having a hard time tracking current and communication down through this right side. It's subtle, but it's what's called into my attention in this moment. I can also feel a little bit of tightness right at the bottom of my rib cage posteriorly. That means in the back, the bottom of the rib cage. It's a very key place we'll be talking about because this is the kidney, renal, adrenal, middle burner, visceral reflection of the state of the nervous system, right? For in any kind of contraction or stress, it's going to show up here as a less alive. And in just bringing my attention in here, I'm noticing heat beginning to move. And then emotionally, I'm going to name, I just named 2 physical things, and now I'm naming emotionally. Feeling a bit tired. I had friends come in late last night. I'm not feeling super glowy. So it's actually perfect, right? I'm a little bit not so glowy. So we're going to actually presence today. I had this idea of doing all these slides, and I already feel this full moon coming. I feel like we just need to drop in and have this experience, what it's like to actually start to activate, clear, harmonize, and amplify our light and our power together. So I'm tired. Yeah, it's a long way of saying the third thing I'm naming is I'm tired. I had coyotes all night long outside my window. I have a layer of excitement on top of all of that just for being here with you. Me even sharing this book that I shared with you is there was a part of me that wasn't even willing to be out enough to reveal what's in there in this public way, right? It's actually quite, it's very confronting in this beautiful way where I'm even naming it, I'm feeling all this, almost like this power surge, a little brightness come into every cell in my body. So everyone now has maybe made note either in the chat or privately in your mind or on a piece of paper, 3 things you're noticing about the state of your being in this moment. And then we're going to come back on the other side of our practice and reevaluate, have some comparison experience. Now in this moment, if you're choosing to be on the screen, as I begin to drop us into a series of noticing and physical positioning or states of being practice that I named in the writing. And if you don't have that ebook, I'm going to ask Kishan to actually put that in the chat now so you make sure that you do have it. I wouldn't do it now unless you're really excited to open the book and look at the images that go along with the practice that we're about to do. Okay. Now I'm getting present in a deeper way in my system right now, because the energetic state that exists in my being is, I'm speaking from it, right? I'm actually transmitting through my voice the sensory experience that I have in my body, which, by the way, I have cultivated over time. I have neurons and meridians that have been grown to actually be able to radiate this particular, let's call it a musical note or a harmonic. There we go. And one of the things that really assists the beginning of connecting our systems both to the earth, right? The feminine pole into the ground, the yin pole, your sense in this moment of gravity meeting you in your seat, of the surface, your contact with the earth, meeting the soles of your feet. Maybe tuning in this moment to some sense of being able to communicate, some sense of your feet extending into the earth, You might want to imagine opening the soles of your feet, which are actually chakra centers, right? Opening those, imagining those opening like a flower blossoming. And then perhaps the imagery of roots moving down, or beams of light, sometimes sturdy cables, until you have a sense of, I'm actually tuning into this shared space here, and I'm waiting for, as our attention moves down the entire, I would say, I'm going to name it the viscosity, my sense of the space becoming fuller and moving down toward the earth. There we go. And it may or may not be convenient for you in this moment as you continue to tune into your lower body. To notice if you're sitting in a hole, right? One of the things we're doing is we're invoking a potent spiral of electricity through the midline of the body. This is a particularly osteopathic idea. I mean, all osteopathy is really noticing what's happening in nature as manifest in the body. So it's not, there's nothing we're talking about as exclusive to any tradition or lineage, right? We're receiving how it is that nature expresses itself within us. And one of the ways that we allow this serpent-like river of vital energy to activate is we move our weight toward our thighs, right? In yoga, we roll toward the front of the sit bones. You might move some of the flesh of your buttocks behind you. And ideally, as described in the ebook, funny name, ebook, such a modern funny term, we would be seated so that our hips are a little higher than our knees. For you, it may be your most comfortable sweet spot may be something else. We're simply seeking the least weighted, most effortless, most fluid relationship with our seat. And I included the idea of that in the ebook. We actually also have, I have a particular wedge pillow I love that I'll ask my assistant to put in the chat. You can also just put a pillow under your behind, or roll a towel, or move to the edge of your chair so that your knees can drop a little bit, and just experiment with what often helps as we root, as we begin to imagine ourselves as perhaps a stalk of seaweed on the bottom of the ocean floor, beginning to seek the sun above, and the aliveness that comes from connecting with these two poles will begin to run current through the body that will begin to do the work of sitting up. Because when we're dull light bulbs, good posture is effort. I'm not even talking about posture. I'm not talking about position. I'm talking about invoking our native fluid state, so that of the electrical current that begins to run through the body will actually create literal and measurable buoyancy that will do both the work of holding you in space, the work of powering any activities that you're doing, then the work of healing your body. So I'm tuning in. I'm just going to review our 3 things that we've done. We moved our attention down to a deliberate visual of connection with the planet. It's the yin pole. We have then imagined a fluid expression emerging in our system. I use the analogy of a stalk of seaweed on the bottom of the ocean floor, beginning to seek connection with the sun above. That's the yang pole, right? This is the plus and minus of a battery. We're actually logging on to a circuit of infinite power and intelligence. A circuit that connects us to infinite power and intelligence and the entire universe. Taking just a few moments to allow this emerging circulation. It's literally, when I speak about the circulations, I talk about lymph and cerebral spinal fluid and blood, and also vital energy. Life force circulation, the primary circulation. Taking a few moments to notice, and if you don't feel it, which we don't often when we begin, we don't. I didn't used to feel any of this. I went through a whole phase of early life in medical training on the heels of a few accidents. I was so dense, I could not feel any of this. So we begin with where we are. Perhaps it is a very gentle thaw that is beginning that may not even be perceptible yet. Of course, practicing collectively amplifies the experience. So much more powerful for me working with people in groups. I'll rephrase, playing with people in groups, because the response is it's really so fast, right? There's a place inside you that remembers all of this, right? It's just under the surface. It's just like riding a bicycle. Your system has, your being, your spirit has memory for this integrated connective state, this returning to belonging. We never actually leave, but we have the perception of leaving, which feels like abandonment. It's very painful. And sometimes as we return and we begin to thaw and we begin to tune into these very subtle nuances of wave-like motion that may now be or will eventually begin to move through your body, you may actually be waking up some stuck emotion. You may actually have some sadness or some discomfort happening transiently, right? I feel confident that actually diving in this way powerfully in a shared space is not only quite safe, it's quite effective, right? It's actually the only way that I would do it, to work with this waking up business at this time in life when there's so much sleepiness, right? There's so much unconsciousness embedded in us. It's simply a part, it's the nature of being a part of a collective that is asleep, where it's patterned into us. We are of it, right? Until we consciously and deliberately begin to wake up and make a different choice and support each other in the returning to our original home. So I want to name now. I think I'm going to allow us to percolate a little bit in this simple version of invoking this initial flow. circulatory flow. I want to add one more piece, which is that resting the tongue across the roof of the mouth is actually an activation of the central axis, the river of life force through the center of the body. I've noticed this, I've learned about it when treating patients and myself. This tongue palate contact, and I'm demonstrating it here, fully resting your tongue across the palate. It not only activates another energetic center in the palate, allowing the heart to communicate with the higher centers, but it actually, I've observed, maintains the integrity of the entire circulatory system and the polar connection through the root and into the higher realm. So resting your tongue gently, no pressure, noticing if there's contact posteriorly in the back where the soft palate and the hard palate meet, or had you been breastfed for 3 years like tribal people, you would have a lot of power connecting there and activating the entire vagus, the vagal pathway and the entire polyvagal network of nerves that are involved with landing in a state of safety and connectability in the body that had everything to do with belonging. The tongue as an activator of the wiring, the memory of the state of belonging. And in naming that state of belonging, I'm feeling all of this softness come into, I didn't see that it wasn't soft. Parts of my way I've arrived here in space, I have had a sense of a little bit of, I just noticed a sense of a little bit of residue of something brittle. Could have been the waking up disoriented, feeling under-rested. I think part of it was just the unknown of arriving here and doing this practice with you in a way I've never done before. I just love naming what's true, just feeling truth. And contribute to that thawing, resolving, harmonizing, and then capacity for freedom and expansion to come in even more deeply. Okay. We're going to continue to percolate here. I have two stories to stimulate your imagination, to wake up wonder and curiosity. That may help us open to receiving even more of the magic of what's possible. Right? Intentional stories to expand even my own ideas and beliefs about what is possible in this physical, the illusion of physical that we're having at this time, and this particularly difficult time. So the first story, let me actually have us tune back in first, back into the feet, back into your visualization of rooted connection with the planet, your visualization of being this long stalk of kelp, seaweed, reaching for the sun. The allowing of the breath to come in and expand that area in the bottom of the rib cage and back. Most importantly, our native breath is not a belly breath. Our native breath is an expansion through the base of the rib cage. Posteriorly, where the spine will stiffen, right? The spine can stiffen when we're not running our serpent. Tuning into allowing that breath not only to expand through that lower area of the rib cage and back, but also into the pelvis, into the tailbone, into the space behind you, into the space below you. Just the amount that is effortless. We don't want to push past the organic amount, right? The amount of thawing that is actually going to open us elegantly and incrementally at the pace that our system can keep pace with and metabolize, right? As we may actually be moving cell memory out of our tissues, we want to allow the amount of holding and the amount of time that will allow those patterns to thaw organically, be digested organically. Otherwise, we may close down a bit because we'll pass our range of tolerance and comfort and safety, right? We want to stay right inside that. We don't want, it's not necessarily a comfort zone. We're staying in a safety zone. We may very well be pushing the limits on our comfort zone in this moment. And that's all right. And if you feel a level of confrontation that is not feeling right for you, I would take a moment to just pause and be simple about the wielding of your attention. Just take your attention back into the soles of your feet, or some place where you can anchor your attention in the physical, right? In the simple, least complex layer of the physical body. Anchoring our attention in the physical. Very, very primary behavior for stabilizing, bringing the light of our consciousness and our spirit into our tissues, which provides nourishment, support, and capacity, right? So that we can actually be here and feel supported. Our own attention anchored in our tissues. We can imagine in this moment being in the middle of a busy office with a lot of stress and discord happening. At those times, I take my attention and I go into my cells and I breathe and I bring out my curiosity. Why is this happening? What is it having me practice? How is it informing me? How am I learning and growing in this moment? It's always about how am I learning and growing in this moment. Just that concept cultivates more safety and more willingness to receive the healing that we're invoking with these intentional connections. The intentional reactivation of the body as a battery of life. I found a brilliant paper by Richard Feynman, one of the most famous physicists of all time, where he mapped it all out. I'm naming very literal principles in nature for which mountains of research are available to reveal our understanding, right? Not to say that the conventional collective is awake enough to be able to sense, to receive that knowledge of this time. That's just what's happening, right? It doesn't register. If your system's completely asleep and you're dull and dense, that level of, I would even call it awakeness. It's that level of awareness of what's possible. It just doesn't have a way to get in yet. And the point I'm making is that we're in choice as to how much we receive or don't receive, right? Okay. I wanted to wait till I could really feel this beautiful fluid wave moving effortlessly through the shared space, right? And we actually just had to, I had to occupy your minds for a moment. I do this with myself all the time, to just allow the dissolving and the thawing to happen and progress to enough to where it's kind of, it's just moving now, moving without needing to be tended. All right, we're not quite at our, right? We did a before, we're going to do an after once I feel us landed in a place of what we call neutral in osteopathy, a level of coherent, integrated cohesiveness, flow, collective flow. So one of my stories that came through this morning to share was that, I had my baby right out of med school, and I bought a fixer-upper home, and I was going to take on the whole world, and I worked in the hospital, and I worked in the clinic, and then I was building my own private practice, and it was completely mad. I was completely mad. And I had been a really assertive athlete and running like 8-10 miles most days to get through the stress of medical school, and didn't understand hydration, didn't understand not sitting in a hole. In fact, I had a bucket seat car with the least flow ergonomics you could possibly imagine, not to mention 8 hours a day sitting and all the stress of constant exams and, basically all the things that would have you land in the exact opposite place that we're invoking today. Beautifully, right? How wonderful. The contrast that experience allowed me. And I was in a bad way. I was really I was hanging by a thread. And I remember I was looking at some lab results, and I was on the heels of a not good diagnosis. It was really scary. And out of, I don't know, my spirit coming through and guiding me, and she said, we're going to breathe now. We're going to connect and we're going to breathe. We don't have time. We don't have money to go have treatments with people. We're just going to do it. And we're going to be invoking this hydration, this expansion, this connecting experience in every moment of every day. Not to say my mentors, right, in both osteopathy and continuum movement and yoga, and I was doing some Tai Chi at the time, all of these ways of finding my way back to my fluid nature. I was desperate. And this may be what had me have to drink, right? We never have to. And I found myself resisting at times and being so curious about that. Why would we resist coming back? Why would we resist embodying our full power? Well, it's actually quite confronting to embody lots of power. It's actually all sorts of ways the ego may not be feeling safe about that, right? Well, I'll rock the boat. I'll make people uncomfortable. I will be a walking disruptive technology that will have them feel things, and maybe they won't like it. Maybe I won't be safe. So many, right? So many reasons we could. And as we get into the body and move our attention into the sensing behavior, we don't have the neurons available to run those stories. We actually can't we can't feel deeply, we can't really be present with our attention and our tissues and have a looping narrative that isn't an extension of that body wisdom. Just isn't, we're just not wired for that. You could say we cannot feel, we cannot stay connected sensorially and also run a discord in the mind. I mean, I encourage you to experiment with that. Don't take my word for anything. It's really, really beautifully, it's really beautifully fun to make these discoveries for ourselves by direct experience. Okay, story number 2. Story number 2. Oh gosh. I actually have another piece to that first story. I remember just being so overwhelmed and under-resourced in my body. And I remember praying and praying and praying that my heart would open. I thought if my heart really opened, I would just know how to live. And I would have, being that the heart is energetically the sun of the solar system of the entire subtle body, and conceivably, right? 3 chakras above, 3 chakras below. And I thought, well, if I could just open my heart, I'd have all that energy. I'd have my son back. I'd know how to be. And I was then just going about my business. I was not in meditation or prayer. And I was walking up the stairs to my office, and somewhere between the 2nd step and the 3rd or 4th step, I felt my heart open completely. And it was so intense and so overwhelming and so blinding. I actually in that moment sat down, caught my breath, and said, thank you, Source. Thank you for revealing to me that it was like, you have to grow into this. This is not a snap, flip a switch and just, you'll burn yourself. So I was, oh, thank you. Thank you for reminding me of patience. Thank you for reminding me that what I'm asking for is coming, and I'm now being shown that there is a pace that is right. So I just feel like that's just a beautiful, it's like, give yourself permission to be where you are. Get rid of all the stories that you should be further along or more awake or more healed. Try on the experience of the idea that you're actually right where you need to be for your learning and healing and growing. Right? It's not for me to tell you that. It's for you to try on the idea that is this a possibility for you? There we go. Looking at the time, we have 21 minutes, so I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. I'm going to summarize the last story quickly because it's really quite phenomenal. I was a resident working in a hospital in an emergency room with a bunch of very regular doctors who thought my way of seeing things was teasable and laughable, and I was pretty good-natured about it. One day, though, this woman came in. She'd fallen and hit her head on a curb. She was otherwise healthy. She was taking her kids to camp, and then all of a sudden, intractable pain. And of course, we did a CAT scan, and there was no, bleed in her brain. There was nothing wrong with her. she responded not at all to any pain medication. So this is almost like the gods decided to set this situation up, right? So here I am, holding my ground with my holistic way of approaching things, which I was never shy about revealing. And I said, well, I'm happy to go in and do some of my work that I do with my hands on people's heads and see if I can. And they had no reason not. Well, they said yes, of course. I also had a looping mind story that said, this is silly. This is a crazy place with noises and beeping and buzzing and fluorescent lights. And so it mentally made no sense. And yet my spirit guided me into this room. I sat with her for 10 minutes and I did exactly what we're doing now. I tuned in. I simply tuned in. I didn't even have a lot of the bits that I'm teaching you. I simply harmonized and connected fully with the space, the ground, it was even more diffuse than that. It was simply mirroring the feeling I remember from arriving in this expanded place with my teachers, right? Sometimes we just get there and then we bookmark this, we remember the location. The point is to remember the location, the state, the particular resonance state of connectedness, so that we can begin to find our way back and ultimately grow neurons for living here all of the time. Well, at that point, I was pretty new. I just knew enough to get at present enough. And within 10 minutes, she mirrored me. As we do, we mirror, we actually do in neuroscience. There's a term called modeling to describe this phenomena. Her system remembered home, remembered how to find its way back to present time and space. And as soon as she arrived, she bounced up off the table, pain-free, as though nothing had ever happened. Now, of course, this is a particularly magical accounting. I have lots of stories like this, but at this time in my journey, to have this happening pretty much as a very new doctor, it felt like a communication, much like my heart opening on the stairs. Like, let's show you, let us guide you and give you encouragement and along the way. Right. So even though it was very challenging to master osteopathy while mastering conventional medicine, I had no choice. I was, it was a very clear calling, as is this way of being with you now. This is the ultimate manifestation of my true calling. To distill everything I've learned and transmit it and share it in this way that renders you able to then share from your being, body, and consciousness out into the world. Sharing resonance and coherence with the world may actually existing as a holding of the memory of that, of the reality of it, so that others can find their way back. And yes, I know I talked in the book about how it actually, this potency comes through, it comes through our skin. It just like beauty, sleep, and love, the manifesting of all of this expanded harmonious energy it's a very lovely experience in the body. For the nourishment and cleansing of our tissues. All right. Tuning back in. There feels to be an expansion coming through. There's a landing that we collectively, there's very much a simplicity about the presence of the ground and the higher connection. And then there's a feeling of an expansion that is the frequency of heart energy in this moment. By the way, on the heels of that amazing outcome in that emergency room, my attending physician came up to me and said, you know, my grandfather was a DO. after he was razzing me for weeks and weeks. And I said, well, I guess you're okay then. And then he proceeded to give me $100,000 worth of equipment to use to measure what happened. And we designed a study and we got the internal review board approval, and I published it, and it was just magic, the whole thing that happened. And I got to speak about it and present about that research while very pregnant with a very big belly. Pretty funny. I remember trying to avoid the glue when I was creating my posters because I didn't want to breathe toxins while I was pregnant. Okay. More stories, right? I was actually called to just speak there, to not stare or be overly preoccupied with this heart energy shifting, right? Sometimes we just need to not, the personality gets to get out of the way. So in osteopathy, we talk about landing in these coherent states. We've actually done about 3 significant landings. Cycles of clearing and expanding, harmonizing. And now that we've completed the 3rd, and there are probably many, many tinier ones in the middle of all of that. And there's a simplicity about the space and a sort of a sense of having landed somewhere pretty sustainable, this resonant state, which you may feel in this moment beginning to hum in your bones, right? When the resonance state that we cultivate anchor in the bones, then we're creating something that's really likely to perpetuate for some time, days and sometimes weeks, especially if we cultivate it, right? So in the trainings that I do, I don't even love to call them that, but we continue to expand the wiring, the meridians, grow new neurons for deepening these states, clearing and healing on, layer by layer is really what we're doing. And I never know how it's going to go. It's always pretty amazing, and it can also become very social, right? A lot of sharing can happen. I'm saying this because I'm describing the deeper work, right? A lot of times people do webinars and they don't really tell you anything because they're trying to cultivate your curiosity so you'll buy their thing. But this is actually what we do. We do it, and then we do it collectively and progressively so that we can create change very quickly in our bodies and in our lives, in our communities, growing deeper and deeper resonance states as our contribution. So in this moment, to yourself, or you can share also in the chat or write down, or just make a note of, how is your perception of being in a body, your physical, emotional states, shifted. And in class, we actually share these with one another. We practice sharing our voices resonantly to connect more deeply. I'd love to do that now. But I would actually say that now, with 9 minutes left, it's a time that one of you could share and or ask a question, and I guide you only in this moment to return to your awareness of your tissues, really sense into the quality, the sensory experience of your tissues before you speak. Share words that express that very state so that you'll continue to add medicine to the space and contribute to the deepening of this shared state. And I think I would say just, you could raise your hand. If your camera's on, you could just raise your hand. And then you would unmute yourself. Christina?
I actually came today with a lot of emotional burden, and I could feel it in my heart and my throat and my liver. It's very congested and very heavy and empty feeling, almost like a heavy rock in those areas. And my feet were cold, hands were cold. And in settling into this shared space today, I was able to feel my emotions release. I had a nice little crying episode, which was wonderful. And let go of what's happened in the past and what's happened in my week, and to be able to be here, present in the moment. And it's to feel my energy flowing. It's been a beautiful time spent, and I appreciate so much all of the energy I feel, the collective energy I feel here from everyone on the call, and from your calming voice and radiant energy, let me say, penetrating energy. It's been a lovely change. Thank you.
I was receiving the quality of your voice like a flavor. It's just, I love just having that, receiving that, and just feeling you feel so still and so serene, and so a beautiful freedom and softness and simplicity. Thank you for bringing that. Terry says she's feeling more sensation through her body, feeling unencumbered. Roseanne, feeling embodied in flow. Christopher said, feels like released stress he wasn't aware he was holding. Felicity, feeling more sensation. When we're done, go look in the mirror and see if you can actually see some rosy, it's a little bit of like rosy glow in your face. I wanted to tell you, let's see. Beth, go ahead.
So I had the pleasure of having your hands on me several years ago, and it was so refreshing to see that I could have that experience without you actually touching me, but just guiding us through this meditation was so brilliant. And I loved the stories, the personal stories in particular, but I did the before and after. I had like a headache and my neck was hurting, and that's gone. So, and I just wanted to thank you. I just think you're fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh my God, I love you. I mean, I love you. It's so, for me, I was given medicine, right? It's in my body. And when I was treating people one-on-one, I wasn't giving it. I couldn't really, and receiving really deeply, even through the recording, has been my experience. It's like just the idea that I could actually, um, just have this beautiful experience of sharing with so many more people is like, it just feels like a blessed life. Yeah. This is like tears of gratitude. Nothing sad is happening here, except for all those years I spent not, these things we suffered through that motivate us to push through any resistance we have to being our full self. Okay, let's see. My assistant's putting some things in here. Halea says, mahalo for your love and light. Thank you. I do want to share some things with you in the chat, and probably will send out, just because who wants to look at the chat when we're all, zenned out. And I really want to share that paper from Richard Feynman on describing, he maps out all of these electrical connections. It's so validating, when people say they say, I don't know about all this energy stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's really concerning to me. You need to get caught up on the science. This is important in this time, really, right? To get anchored in reality beautifully. I also saw a question. Kishan, Holly, you had asked for that paper. My assistant just posted it. Richard Feynman's papers describing our electrical exchange with the earth and the ionosphere. And then I wrote a paper on all of this tongue stuff. It's really, I wrote a beautifully peer-reviewed 300 research articles attached to the summary of the significance of the tongue. It doesn't really talk about the energetic part, but it talks about lots of osteopathic considerations. And then in my training, we go into all of it, right? So I do, of course, the purpose of a webinar is to have people become aware of your work, have a taste of it. And then for those of you participating in the webinar, my live training that starts October 25th is $995 for 7 weeks, right? So research shows it takes 6 to 7 weeks to significantly repattern your nervous system neuroplastically. So we embark on a journey to regrow both our meridians and our nervous system. And my assistant will put, then everyone who is here today can have a discount. It's $200 off with the code OsteoFlowStar. And then if you don't think you'll join live and you just want the archive of lessons, it's way less expensive. It's like $395. And that code is OsteoFlowBright. She just put those in the chat. And if you don't remember, just email us. And those are good for a week, those codes. That's the early bird. Also, Kishan, will you share the paper? Oh, she just shared the paper on the tongue. And then I also want to make sure, and it's 11:01 for anyone who needed to be on time for something else. The actual course page, and would you, oh yeah, that's perfect, Kishan. And also the ebook itself, if you didn't actually receive it, which was the lead in to this gathering. And I know I sometimes download things and lose them, or you might have just come straight to the webinar and not received this beautiful book, which is it's like a preview of the larger book that I'm writing on movement and flow with Gina Bria, the anthropologist who is the advocate for water science and consciousness, who was just appointed by John Kerry to the State Department to influence water policy, right? Very big things are happening with us moving into the world with the assertiveness of the wake-up call around hydration, consciousness, water, heart energy, coherence. This is just what is called for now. This is what's happening, right? We speak all the time about how, I don't know, a month ago we had fears that we no longer have, because that's just not one of the options. Right? We're moving ahead. I'm willing to stay for another handful of minutes. I don't want anyone here who has a question not to be able to ask it or offer up something that they want to have witnessed or heard by the group. Sometimes it's a reflection or noticing or sharing of something you received or feel grateful for. I would love if you have, being that we actually set healing in motion today, right? In osteopathy, we talk about how the treatment actually begins once you get up off the table, because you've been reset like an engine that's been tuned, and now you're going to go move through your life and sense the clearing. Even with an engine, that takes several days for all the lines to clear out and the engine to kind of settle. And you may have noticings, you may have physical shifts happen, you may have emotional shifts happen, and I really love to hear about those. So please feel free to share just by replying to the email that you received in relation to this event. And now I think we could unmute and just say goodbye. Goodbye until next time. I'm doing another webinar, I think, in 10 days, so I'd love to see you there.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Jackie. So good to see you.
Bye. Beautiful
Bye,
shared
Diane.
space.
Bye, Holly.
Beautiful,
Bye,
darling.
thank
So
you so
special.
much.
I'll message you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, Jean-Baptiste.
Bye, Michelle.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
For information on our more extended trainings, which offer continuing medical education credits for physicians, email us at courses@flowismedicine.com. And please subscribe to this YouTube library archive if you wish to receive future updates.